This video was made possible by viewers like you through the WITW Kickstarter and Patreon. What do you know about time? It's a ticking contradiction. It's simple and complex, actual and abstract, straightforward and mysterious. We're all bound by it. Each rotation of the gears pushing us farther from the past and further into the unknown. Do we define time, or does time define us? The Emerald City shimmered with an enchanting green glow. As the key location in L. Frank Baum's classic book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the magical city tempted everyone. It was a place where dreams could come true. But danger waited around every corner of the yellow brick road leading to it. Flying monkeys, toxic flowers, and a wicked witch. In 2003, the musical Wicked started its own journey to the Emerald City, with a world premiere staging in San Francisco. Based on Gregory Maguire's best-selling novel, the show presented a daring new take on the Oz people knew and loved. Instead of colorful backdrops and ruby red slippers, there were rusty metal gears and snake-like vines. A 45-foot-long marionette hung ominously from the proscenium, a fancy word for the front part of a stage, waiting for its chance to kick off the show with glowing red eyes, flapping wings, and a smoke-blowing head. With $14 million on the line, the design team stood in the back of the crowded theater hoping for the best. If the puppet malfunctioned, their yellow brick road could head straight off a cliff. This is a story about time, about seeing things through a different set of eyes, and of how a team of artists brought a fire-breathing monster to life. This is the lore of the Time Dragon.
This is the Wicked Witch of the West.
The Wicked Witch of the West. It has a capital W. She doesn't have a first name. She doesn't have a backstory, which meant that nobody could say that I got it wrong.
Are you a good witch or a bad witch? I'll get you, my pretty.
Oz, the great and powerful.
Eugene Lee threw a vintage clock down the stairs. The wood cracked. The glass shattered. The springs flew. Unlike most scenic designers who started with concept drawings, Lee liked to start by building a messy set model. He loved stuff. His Rhode Island home was layer upon layer of objects, large and small, useful and not, all of them with a similar vintage and patina, as Sandy Keenan of the New York Times put it. A giant pair of scissors hung in the walkway to his living room, which was decorated with dozens of copper Empire State Buildings and old tin globes. His studio looked like an I Spy book, with lamps of all shapes and sizes hanging from the ceiling, the wall scattered with pictures, paintings, and clocks. As the set designer behind Saturday Night Live and Broadway musicals like Sweeney Todd and Seussical, the only thing more varied than Eugene Lee's collection was his career. He knew how to make the world of a book unfold on the stage, a skill that was put to the test in 2002. When the novel Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, shattered nearly every bestseller list, a tornado of producers circled at the chance to turn it into a movie. But a composer named Stephen Schwartz imagined another path. Known for tunes from Broadway hits like Pippin, Godspell, and the Disney films Pocahontas and The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Schwartz felt the material would make a great stage musical. Universal Studios had snatched up the film rights to Wicked years before, but they didn't know how to turn the dense 400-page novel into a movie. No matter what they tried, the script always lacked the heart of the source material. Turning it into a musical could just be the trick. They just needed permission first to take the stage route.
Stephen Schwartz was able to persuade Universal to consider putting the brakes on the notion of a movie, the script of which had not been very well admired by the people who were going to have to fund it. And he was told, you'll have to go talk to Gregory Maguire, who owns the rights and has a controlling interest in what happens next. And maybe you can persuade him to let you turn this into a stage play first, and if it's successful, then we can get a movie out of it. I was not hard persuaded, because I like the theater and I like musicals. Well, hello there. I am Gregory Maguire. I am the author of the novel called Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West.
With blessings from Maguire and Universal, Stephen Schwartz went to work. Knowing just how wicked the gossip could be from critics and theatergoers in New York City, the team decided to stage a tryout run of Wicked the Musical in San Francisco. This way, they'd have the space to iron out any kinks, generate positive buzz, and hopefully recruit a few more investors to finance a future Broadway run. That being said, a bad reception in San Francisco could send a house crashing down on their New York City dreams. As Schwartz and his creative team put Maguire's Oz to music, they started asking set designers to come up with a pitch for Wicked's look. This included Eugene Lee and his associate designer, Edward Pierce.
Obviously, we had our own memories and understanding of The Wizard of Oz and how that story was told. We went back a lot for visual research to the Denslow illustrations from some of the earlier books of Wizard of Oz.
From the illustrations of the original book to the classic movie, the portrayal of Oz as this dazzling wonderland etched itself into pop culture lore. Not wanting to imitate, Eugene Lee started his inspiration hunt in the most novel of places: the Wicked book. After throwing an antique clock down the stairs of his shop, Lee constructed a massive set model pitch for Wicked in a single weekend. And directly in the middle perched a giant puppet, the Clock of the Time Dragon. Armed with his pitch in a protective foam board box, Lee commuted into New York City. Nobody quite knew what to make of his design when they saw it.
The Clock of the Time Dragon is mounted on a wagon and stands as high as a giraffe. It is nothing more than a tottering, freestanding theater, punched on all four sides with alcoves and proscenium arches. Below, featured in the dozens of doorways, windows, and porches, are puppets, marionettes, figurines.
Much like Lee's vision, Gregory Maguire's Oz was unlike anything that came before it. Maguire's story wasn't a prequel or a retelling, but rather an exploration into a world of its own. Instead of using L. Frank Baum's characters to teach self-reliance and friendship, Gregory Maguire wanted to question the nature of religion, spectacle, and evil. He dared to ask, what if the wizard wasn't so wonderful? The Wicked Witch of the West, not so wicked. The merry old land of Oz, not so merry. Needing to establish these darker themes early on, Maguire didn't pick up with the characters everyone knew. Instead, he focused on a minister fighting a giant puppet.
The Clock of the Time Dragon, by the time you get to page 30, I think, in Wicked, maybe even earlier, is showing puppets engaged in carnal acts. They're rude, they're raw, very much like some medieval plays too, who weren't as constrained as Victorian mores would have insisted they be.
When Maguire started thinking about the conflicts he wanted to explore in Wicked, a big one revolved around people's love of meaningless spectacle, and how that spectacle could drive them to violence. In its first appearance in the book, the Clock of the Time Dragon wheeled into town and told the tale of a man with, quote, 2 full sets of male goods, cheating on his wife with a widow and her daughter, after which they attacked him. Though it looked like an innocent puppet show, well, maybe not that innocent, the scandal unfolding was actually happening to people who were living in the village.
Part of its capacity to engage any audience is that the troupe that walks around with it is probably sent on ahead and gathers information about what the stresses are in this particular village or that particular village, so that those back at the helm, as it were, can fashion the next story to seem to be magically responding to the reality of life in the village that they've just entered. And it will seem like magic, because how do they know about this or that or the other?
The man with 2 sets of male goods and the widow portrayed in puppet form stood embarrassed as the entire crowd turned against them. Trying to stop the Clock of the Time Dragon from corrupting his followers, the minister begged the crowd to ignore it. This plan went south when the clock's puppet show suggested the minister was using his pregnant wife to hoard riches. The crowd attacked him, then picked up their pitchforks and marched towards his home. To protect the minister's wife from the mob, a group of handmaids helped her escape and hid her inside the Time Dragon clock. With the mob marching towards the house and the puppet troupe getting drunk at a bar, it seemed like the perfect hiding spot. Once inside, the wife gave birth to a girl with emerald green skin. Elphaba, the future Wicked Witch of the West.
The other reason I wanted to put it right at the beginning when I thought of it is I needed to show how far off from the Emerald City this was. And I also needed to show, I'm afraid to say, evidence that this was not a children's book. And I needed to put that up front and center right away so that anybody flipping through the first couple of pages to see about the Wicked Witch of the West's life story would know right away this was not a book for children. You know, I didn't do it to shock, I did it to inform. It's also just puppets. I mean,
in the introduction for his Oz novel, L. Frank Baum stated he wanted to write a story where the heartaches and nightmares were left out. Gregory Maguire wanted to do the exact opposite with Wicked. There's a reason it's on many school districts' banned books list. Murder, bestiality, and political violence are just some of the themes it asks readers to think about. Although this worked great in the novel, if the musical wanted to stand a chance on Broadway, it needed to appeal to families, like Baum's Oz books and the popular movie. Keeping this in mind, the musical script moved its focus from the fight between religion and power to a story of friendship between Elphaba and Glinda the Good Witch. The musical also changed how that story was told. Instead of following Elphaba's journey from outsider to melted popsicle in real time, the musical started with the Wicked Witch already dead, before rewinding the clocks to tell the story as a flashback. Any moments involving the Time Dragon never made it into the script. When it came to designing sets, Eugene Lee always viewed the transitions between scenes as one of the most important aspects. The script for Wicked the Musical was written more like a movie than a stage show, with the timeline jumping around to countless magical locations and moments in time. This made the transitions especially important. Lee needed to find a way to make them look seamless and happen fast. That's when he thought about the clock of the time dragon. Sure, it didn't show up anywhere in the script, but what if he placed the actual musical inside of it?
We're really attracted to the clock of the time dragon, which is described pretty specifically in the novel, and kind of keyed in onto that, kind of the use of a clock, the use of looking into gears and the machinery and the mechanisms, and how the wizard kind of manipulates the world. We liked the idea of creating a stage space that was transformative through machinery, but simple stagecraft machinery, and that within that, the story would unfold.
In Lee's mind, the time dragon solved the transition issue. Instead of turning off the lights or dropping a curtain, the actors could just move set pieces in plain view, each of them unwitting performers in the Wizard's puppet show. Composer Stephen Schwartz always imagined the set for Wicked as this futuristic utopia. The model Eugene Lee presented felt more like something straight out of the Industrial Revolution. The mechanical stage overflowed with clockwork gears, surrounded by metal rails and aged wooden boards. It looked unlike anything Schwartz envisioned, but it instantly felt right. Eugene Lee and Edward Pierce got the job. Still, designing a model was one thing. Actually bringing it to life called for a different type of magic. Every day in Munich, Germany, crowds of tourists gather to watch knights joust, fanfares blare, and bells chime. Constructed in 1908, the elaborate puppet show made up of 43 bells and 32 life-size animatronics shows Duke Wilhelm V's marriage to Renata of Lorraine. Below, a group of dancers celebrate the end of a plague. Perched at the very top of the spectacle sits a golden rooster that chirps 3 times when the show ends. Fairly early in the writing process for the Wicked novel, Gregory Maguire gathered images and cultural moments from a time when people viewed magic as a natural part of the world, not fantasy and not an invention. For Maguire, this placed the ideal time period near the end of medieval times, when people believed in deals with the devil and branded wise women as witches.
And as I was pulling together various conceits and memories, one thing that I remembered was a postcard that I had that was arranged vertically, like that. And it was a postcard of something called the Rathaus Glockenspiel. It is a giant clock, mechanical clock, an entablature built onto the side of a church tower in Munich. And every day, it goes through a kind of performance that lasts 15 minutes with figures revolving on corkscrew platforms and coming in and out of doors and retelling stories of things that had happened 400 years earlier. So I had this card. I loved it. And, a friend had given it to me and written a Bible verse on the back of the card that said, "Do your work in your time, and the Lord will reward you in his time." So I thought of it as a clock. It's about time. Now, you might also remember that the subtitle of Wicked is called The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West. It's not just the life of the Wicked Witch of the West. It's not just The Wicked Witch of the West, which was the proposed title by my publisher that I rejected. But the times are just as important as the life, because we are made by our times. So the clock of the time dragon suggests this is the time that Elphaba, Alfie, is coming into her life. It is a time that is pitched on the mortal edge between paganism and rationality.
Meanwhile, Eugene Lee's time dragon teetered on the mortal edge between fantasy and practicality. The creative team loved the overall clock theming of the set, but they weren't too keen on its central feature.
And at some point I do recall conversations about like, well, why do we need the dragon? I think at the time it was like costing $15,000 or something. And they were just looking for anywhere we could, save in a manner that would be responsible. But I do recall Eugene, in his way, just kind of reflecting that the kids will really like the dragon. And so therefore, that's why we should keep it. Basically saying, in this very dark story, there needs to be a little bit of levity and something fun, and using the stagecraft to do that.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
During his time at Saturday Night Live, Eugene Lee became good friends with a man named Robert Flanagan. Flanagan created popular puppets and props for the show, like the grizzled Tony puppet, Toonces the driving cat, and, well, if you know, you know.
He was always the go-to guy at SNL when on a Wednesday night, the script writers would come up with a crazy idea and they needed some type of large puppet to show up 2 days later. So he seemed very fitting to bring in for our Wicked adventure.
Eugene Lee stopped Robert Flanagan in the hallway at Saturday Night Live and started talking about his idea for a giant dragon. The puppet promised to be a mechanical marvel, and he wanted Flanagan to build it. Lee shared some of his sketches and talked about how he wanted the wings to flap, the mouth to open and close, and the head to move left to right.
My name is Brian. I was friends with Bob Flanagan for over 20 years. When I was visiting him every Tuesday night at his shop, we would have dinner while he was working on whatever projects, be it Saturday Night Live, which was a regular thing for him when it was in season, but also the big thing at the time was building all of the Wicked props, particularly the Time Dragon.
Not one for the spotlight, Flanagan always enjoyed being the man behind the curtain, using his talent to bring much of Wicked's magic from the page to the stage. Everything from lion cubs to wizard heads to rubber green babies flew out of Den Design Studio, Flanagan's shop located in Brooklyn.
Bob's shop was always the same. It was a chaotic disaster. It was never clean. It always had wood shavings, dust, foam flakes from whatever he was building was everywhere. He was very fond of his pets. He had several Pomeranians who were rescues, and they were typically nesting in some pile of stuff. They'd create a little bed in some foam until it finally got so horrible it would just get thrown away.
With Wicked's world premiere fast approaching in 2003, the question of how to build the Time Dragon put Flanagan's know-how to the test. Not only did it need to look cool, it also needed to be easy to manipulate and not cost a wing and a claw to build.
He would make us little ideas, little models, little versions of it, and we would choose, the wing from this, the head from there, this one with horns, and we made little models of it until he kind of finally decided, let's just go big and make the big one. We were working inside the model so much that everybody stopped paying attention to the proscenium frame, and we worked for many, many, many weeks and months on what was happening on the stage. And ultimately, it was time to get something built so that we would have something to go out of town with.
Running with the idea of not hiding the stagecraft from the audience, Flanagan built the Time Dragon to operate like a colossal marionette puppet. The detailed setup consisted of various weights, ropes, and pulleys. One set of ropes connected to the wings, and another set attached to the head and neck. Anytime the dragon needed to come to life, two puppeteers would climb a ladder backstage to position themselves on the side balcony. Once cued, each would pull their specific rope. The ropes connected to the wings would flap them back and forth via a foot pedal and brute strength, while the other one, connected to the head, would swing it to the left and to the right, the mouth opening and closing with it. The harder they tugged the ropes, the more ferocious the movement. Staying true to Eugene Lee's vision for an industrial Oz and Gregory Maguire's description of the Time Dragon in the book, Flanagan made the puppet appear metallic, but built it in a way that it could move quietly and be light enough to hang safely above the audience.
This is my Time Dragon that I built with Bob's help and his touring of what parts to make. It was done in lots of little pieces. It's completely articulated. If you look inside, you can see that sometimes there was just modeling foam squirted up in there with tape that's coming off, black tape, carabiners. Just, he would have you grab whatever you thought would make the trick work. It's been in my living room for like 20 years. It's super heavy and just clumsy. The ones that go over the proscenium, they're like a small vehicle. They're huge. You could probably climb into the head. It's really big and really tall.
The head, I would say, is 3 foot diameter and probably sticks out about 10 to 15 feet tip to tip. The construction was a series of light metal rings with foam that was carved and formed and then covered with material to ensure that it didn't fall apart.
They're small pieces, I think, of like a cheesecloth, a very lightweight cotton that had to be soaked in some kind of glue, and then just randomly layered like paper mache layers all over the whole piece. It would be fully dry, and then we'd paint the whole base silver. And then we would dry brush black or metal colors on top of it. Just
the wings are metal construction with like burlap and canvas stitching, some patchwork and laced together with leather. The wingspan is the full width of the proscenium, so it's about 45 feet wide, tip to tip. There's a series of smoke hoses that kind of go through the nostrils and back to a smoke machine back in the proscenium to provide bursts of smoke out of each of the nostrils.
At one time I thought about running smoke through the nostrils, but that's a whole nother rigging, and how frequently am I gonna smoke my house out?
There's obviously some metal in there to keep the structures and the shape and the rigging working well. But very lightweight. The whole thing's just a couple 100 pounds, actually. It's not very heavy at all.
Flanagan built the most of the Time Dragon he could in his shop. But given the sheer size, they couldn't test the full puppet in Brooklyn. Until they put it together in the theater in California, there was no way to know if it would actually work. In mid-2003, the Wicked pageant wagon rolled into the Curran Theater in San Francisco. Everyone hoped to follow the yellow brick road right to Broadway, but if the audience and the critics didn't react well, they'd wind up stuck in a poisonous poppy field.
At the same time we were loading in, they were in rehearsal in New York, and on a new musical, numbers can come and go, scenes can get switched around, ideas that they thought would work just didn't work. And so we were also at the same time kind of redesigning as the show was loading in, because certain scenes were cut, pieces of scenery that we had made, kind of made it as far as getting to the curb in San Francisco, but never quite made it down into the loading dock.
After spending so much time imagining the set and the model, the growing pains of making it a reality were unlimited. A mechanical bubble that mimicked a giant clock pendulum for Glinda to float down on, flying rigs to send monkeys soaring above the crowd, and a massive crane to help Elphaba defy gravity all kept everybody more than busy. And that's not even mentioning all the smoke machines, bubble machines, and the 15-foot tall wizard puppet. As the scenic team scurried around the theater like field mice, Robert Flanagan and his team carefully pieced together the Time Dragon.
When we were in San Francisco, everybody has tech tables all scattered around the auditorium during that, 6-week tech period. And so you start to have fun little games that happen because you're all kind of sequestered in this room together. And so at our tech table, we kind of made a little voting ballot box for the name of the dragon. And so everybody could write the name down that they thought and stick it in the box. And we did that for a little while until everybody had a chance to offer their ideas. And I don't remember the process of elimination, and eventually there was some kind of vote. But the dragon's name is Oswald. I can't quite remember how that came about, but somebody who recommended it, it obviously was very popular because then it won the popular vote. So there you have it.
Is it spelled Ozwald?
Yes, Oswald the dragon.
Due to the size of Oswald, the entire puppet had to be constructed close to the ground for most of the set load-in process. First, the team attached the head, then the wings, then the feet. Next, they wove miles of teabag dyed ropes through an elaborate pulley system. With so much on the line, the team spent hours untangling ropes and double-checking sandbags. As the clock counted down, the team hoisted Oswald the Time Dragon nearly 30 feet above the stage, a spot they hoped the puppet would stay for good. Nobody knew what to expect at Wicked's first performance, especially not Gregory Maguire.
I signed a contract that allowed me permission to approve or to reject the hiring of 4 key players: the composer, the lyricist, the book writer, as they call it, and the director. But I did not request the right to veto or even see the script before it was put on the boards. And I did that on purpose because I didn't want the creators of the play to have to feel they needed to please me in order to move forward. I wanted them to please themselves. I had pleased myself with L. Frank Baum's work. He hadn't come out of the grave to haunt me and say, "You can't do this to my Wicked Witch of the West. How dare you?" So I didn't want to haunt them. I wanted them to feel free to go about this project with as much liberty as any artist needs in order to work.
Staying true to his word, the author kept his distance so the creative team could make it their own. Now he sat in the Curran Theater, staring at a glimmering map of Oz and a massive time dragon. According to the San Francisco Examiner, Wicked cost $14 million to stage in California. With so much money invested and sky-high expectations, a lot of pressure was placed on creating a technical feast for the eyes. First impressions are everything. And as the first major effect in the show, a time dragon malfunction right out of the gate could ruin the vibe for everybody. Each tick of the clock brought more and more people into the theater.
There's a certain energy when the audience comes in for the first time, and we're all sitting or standing, most likely, pacing in the back of the auditorium as the audience is filing in for the first preview. Nobody knows what this show's about. They're just excited to be there. They know it's exciting to be there on that first time it's ever coming together.
The buzz in the theater grew like a pack of flying monkeys as 2 stagehands snuck up the backstage ladder and got into position. Holding the ropes and their breaths, the pair waited until the orchestra launched into a thunderous overture. Instantly, the blank eyes of the Time Dragon popped crimson red, and the puppeteers heaved on their ropes. Behind a flood of smoke, the hulking creature sprung to life. Up above, the series of interwoven ropes carefully passed each other through a set of 9 pulleys. Slowly, the wings started to flap and the towering head swung side to side. Down below, the stunned crowd of spectators broke into an ear-splitting cheer. The puppet moved like clockwork.
I don't think they were necessarily cheering for the dragon, but I like to think of it that way. I think they were just very, very happy to be there and part of a very special experience, but let's say they were cheering for the dragon.
Even though the Time Dragon watches over the entire show, its role in the musical isn't the same as in the book.
I didn't know until the first time I saw the play put on before a paying audience in San Francisco in 2003, how and if the Clock of the Time Dragon was going to be used in the story. And the fact is, it isn't much used. It's implied, but it's not used. There are a couple of lines that refer to the Time Dragon clock. This is a nod to my novel, which was very nice.
My understanding is he loves the design. He was not in kind of the roll up your sleeves meetings when we were developing the musical, but that's not to say that he didn't offer his opinions to others and found their way to our meetings. But I suspect that he's quite pleased.
The wings that flap a little bit are attached to ropes. You can tell it's supposed to be an apparition that's clearly an invention. It's not magic. You are supposed to be able to see the gear work behind this frightening apparition, just as the Wizard of Oz is a kind of gear work operator as well. But it's almost a kind of shadow reference to my book and to the notions of fate that, in fact, we all have to examine all the time. To what degree are we actually free to live our lives and to behave in this manner or that? Are we free at all? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's worth asking the question.
The fate of Wicked moving to Broadway relied heavily on a positive reaction in San Francisco. Reviews were mixed, with many critics citing problems with the script and the music. One thing they all agreed on, however, was how great the set design was. While critics might not have raved over the show, audiences loved it. Fueled by positive word of mouth, powerful ticket sales, and a whole lot of narrative changes, Wicked flew into the Gershwin Theater on Broadway later that year. It's been dancing through life for 22 years and counting.
But I've seen the play, I think 57 and a half times now, and I don't see any strong coherence about when the dragon is activated and when it isn't.
Most of those moments, as we look through the script and the sequencing, are related to moments where there's some type of magic happening on stage. It's always kind of traced through the story and the narrative and kind of linked to Elphaba's journey discovering her magic.
The more Wicked grew, the more important it became to retain the heart of the original design by Eugene Lee, Edward Pierce, and Robert Flanagan.
And while Bob was alive, he did every international production for us. No one else built the dragon. It was always Bob. These were just so personal to him and to us as designers and creators that I'm sure someone else could take his drawings and take the photos and take the specifications and do a great job. But it really wasn't about replicating a piece of scenery. It was more about ensuring that the character of the dragon was consistent throughout. And we owed it to Bob, who really developed it from nothing and probably lost a lot of money making the first one for $15,000. And the first one was really much a prototype. And there it hangs over the Gershwin stage. That was the original prototype.
I don't think people really knew who he was or the fact that he built it. He enjoyed being in the background and never really worked hard to try to push his name forward. And not many people know that the extraordinary talent that went in behind the scenes of creating these amazing works of art.
Everywhere we went, it had that same first impression when the downbeat of music happens and the first audience sees it. You still see that same sense of delight. And so to me, that's just, Bob smiling at us every night. And as far as Eugene's concerned, again, like I have true love for him, and the show lives on 8 times a week at the Gershwin and on the tour and in London and currently in Tokyo and in Seoul. In each of those moments, that's Eugene looking down on us and having his viewpoint and his storytelling sensibility is there every single performance.
What do you know about time? It's a ticking contradiction. It's simple and complex, actual and abstract, straightforward and mysterious. We're all bound by it. Each rotation of the gears pushing us farther from the past, further into the unknown. So do we define time? Or does time define us?